I'm going to be going over the individual parts of Fusion today so that you're able to kind of learn to read almost. So if Fusion is a book, I'm going to teach you how to break down the words and figure out what they say. I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense, but the gist is, once you learn these foundational concepts, you'll be able to go anywhere in Fusion, and even if you don't recognize something, you'll be able to tell kind of like what the parts are that make it up. Those basic foundational things that we're going to be covering today inside of Fusion are nodes and their different parts, the quick access bar and how to customize it specifically for you, where to find the effects library and how to use the effects library, media pool versus clips, how to find and use viewing windows 1 and 2. We're going to cover the spline menu as well as the inspector. We're going to hit a little bit of always present, very easy to miss, but very important information. And then after we do that, I'm going to do a sample build where I show you how to do a transition with a mask, and it's going to be very easy to follow after we just learned about all those individual parts. Once we build that sample build and it's working, we'll go ahead and do another sample build where we're going to do a title call out. That's a little bit more complicated, but it's still going to be super approachable after we learn all of this stuff. So if you're ready to learn how to use Fusion and never be scared to click on that little magic wand again, let's jump into it. Here we are on the edit page. From here, if we go into our toolbox, which we can find inside of our effects library, we can go to Effects, Fusion Composition, and then drag one of these out into our timeline. Now that we have this here, we're going to go into our Fusion composition by clicking on it, putting our playhead right at the beginning there, and clicking on Fusion. Now inside of this one, I've already added some stuff, and that's just to give us this image here. And if we want to look at our nodes down here, we have background 1, which is the color black, which makes this background here. We have text 1, which is yellow and says Fusion. And that gives us our words in here. Let's get started by talking about the parts of a node. What is a node? What are the parts of a node? A node in Resolve is going to be similar to a layer in most other programs, right? So instead of going from the bottom up, like if you were building with layers, you're going to go from left to right like you were reading a book. So right here, we go from left to right. The thing on the bottom, right here, is our background. And then as we move to the right, we add things on top of our bottom layer or node. So we have background, and then on top of that, we have text, and then that goes into our media out. And media out is what's going to leave Fusion and go to your edit page. So the individual parts of an individual node can vary depending on which node you're using. As far as I know, the most basic node is a mask. So I'm going to add a mask using our quick access bar, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And now that we have this mask selected, this rectangle 1, you can see that it shows up here in our viewing window. But it's not doing anything because it hasn't been added to our node web yet. So we have this mask that's not connected to anything, and it has a square on the right and a blue triangle on the left. If we hover over these, we can get more information about them, but the right side, that square, is always going to be an output. So you can see we have a square on our background node, a square on our text node, and a square on our merge node. And they all go from that node to the next node because this is our output. All of your triangles are going to be different inputs. You can see on this merge node, we have a yellow one, a green one, and a blue one, whereas on our background, text, and our rectangle node, we only have a blue one. Now if we hover over that blue one, it'll show us that that is our effect mask. So right here as well, we have our effect mask. And again, blue is effect mask. So your blue input is always going to be where you put masks. So if I drag this, let's get a reminder of what shape this is going to look like once it's connected to our node web. So if we drag our mask output into our mask input on our text node, our text will be masked. And it's that easy to add a mask. And then if we click on the second half of this closer to the text node, it'll get rid of that connection. And then this same mask, again, if we drag it to this mask input, will mask the background. We have the name of the node, which generally describes somewhat of what that node does. We have an output for our node, and we have an input for our node. This one only uses one input, one output, but if we go to our merge and we disconnect all of these by clicking on the second half of their connections, we can see that this one has 3 different inputs. It has one for a mask, that blue one there. If we hover over our green triangle here, it comes up and says merge 1 foreground. So that is going to be our foreground input for our merge 1 node. And then this yellow one here is going to be background. And then we have a regular output. So we're going to input a background into our yellow one here, and this doesn't have to be a background node, it just has to be whatever you want to be behind your foreground. So you could have 2 different texts on the screen and one could pass behind the other. It doesn't have to be a background node. And now that our background is connected, we can go ahead and connect our foreground to our green triangle here, our foreground input, but nothing shows up. And that is because the final thing that we're going to be talking about right now, this little guy right here. So just like anything else, if we hover over these, our little dot here is going to say left view, and our little dot here is right view. And since it's white, it's lit up, we're viewing on our right side viewer. The hotkeys for these are 1 and 2. So if you want to show something on the left, you press 1, and if you want to show something on the right, you press 2. Same if you want to take it away from those places. So say we want to see our background on the left side, we'll click on our background and we'll press the number 1. And then if we want to bring our text to the right side, we can press the number 2 with our text selected. Now we have them split. But if we want to see them together, we can either click on the merge and then we see them both, or we can drag our merge into our media out and show our media out in the right side viewer by pressing the number 2. That might sound a little complicated at first, but once you do it a few times, it'll make a lot more sense. We can see that our background is still in the left viewer, so I'm going to click on our background, and then I'm going to press 1, and it's going to go away from that left viewer. So to review, the parts of a node are the name of that node, which generally describe what that node does or what it's doing in your node web. We have different colored triangles for inputs, which if we hover over them, we can see what input they want. So we have the green, which is the foreground, the yellow, which is the background, and sometimes you'll even have pinks and different shades of colors, but if you're confused about any of them, just hover over. It'll tell you what it is. We've also got a gray square behind each one, which is the output for the signal that's coming into that node through its inputs. That does it for the basics of what a node is and what its parts are. Next, we're going to talk about the quick access bar, which is this bar right here in the middle, which is super full of all these little tools. When you start, your quick access bar is going to look just like mine. But a lot of these things, especially when you're getting started, you're not going to be using in your day-to-day Fusion use. So if you want to simplify your quick access bar and only use the things that you need quick access to, you're going to go ahead and right-click somewhere in there, go to Customize, Create Toolbar, name it whatever you want to name it. I'm going to name it New Toolbar. So now that we're not using our default toolbar anymore, we can actually make changes to this quick access bar. So all of these tools here are 3D tools. But say you don't want to use 3D tools in your day-to-day Fusion use, you can just go ahead and right-click in the 3D section, go to Customize, and go to Remove Group. You can get rid of all of those 3D tools. But say you want to get rid of just one thing in there because maybe it's confusing or maybe you just keep accidentally clicking on it instead of something else. You can go ahead and right-click that thing, go to Customize, and remove that one individual thing that you just right-clicked. All we have to do to add something new into our quick access bar is click and drag it out of our node web or anywhere down here into the quick access bar, and boom, there it is, right there. Take that out again so I can show you a second time. Text. Drag it in, boom, there it is. So between adding things and removing things from your quick access bar, you can customize it to be exactly what you need for your Fusion use in almost no time at all. The next thing that we're going to be talking about in this video is the effects library. You can find your effects library in the top left corner of the Fusion page. It's got another little magic wand and it says effects library. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And then we have all of these different tools that we can use that Resolve gives us. Some of these are only available inside of Resolve Studio, but when you try to add one of those, it will tell you big right on your screen. You'll have to click on something that says, I want to add it anyway, or don't add it. If you ever want to check out what nodes you have access to, just go ahead and click through these. And if you want to figure out what something does, like if plasma sounds cool to you, you can drag it out into your node web, see that it has a mask input and just a regular output. So if we want to see what this does, we'll go ahead and drag the output into the input of something that's being displayed, or we can display it by itself by pressing 1 or 2. But for this, we're going to drag it into our media out, and it's going to show up right here. And you can do this with anything up here in the effects menu. Say we want one of these. Drag that out, put that in there, and we see what that looks like. So you can move through all of these and just kind of get an idea of what you're able to access inside of Fusion. And that's a really good way to get comfy with different nodes that you maybe haven't seen before. In here, we also have templates. If we take something out of the templates section here, we can go ahead and drag out, say, DVE. Once we have DVE in here, you can see that it has apparently a stack. So if you want to see what this is made of in this stack, just go ahead and double click it. It'll open in this little window, and you'll be able to see all of the individual parts of the DVE effect. So let's get a look at this and see what it does. We'll go ahead and drag something into its background input, and then we'll drag its output into our media out here, and it gives us kind of this picture-in-picture effect. Then we can go ahead and break these connections. We'll reattach our media out to our merge, and we'll go ahead and delete this effect. So that is the effects library. It's a great place to go to get oriented, figure out what you have access to, as well as figure out how to build some of these templates and maybe get some ideas for your own things that you'd like to build. Next up, we have a pretty easy one, very basic. We have media pool versus clips. And this one trips people up in the beginning, but it's another one of those things that once you know it, and you're good to go. So media pool is going to show all of the raw media that you're using in your project. So your main video clips, any images you might be using, things like that, are going to be in your media pool. If you want to move to a different clip, you're going to go into clips. And now we have all of our cut pieces that make up our timeline right now. We can see that I've got my intro down here, so we have a lot more clips than we have things in the media pool. So if you wanted to do something, say, to this PNG of the inspector that I used, we would go ahead and click on that, and then we have our media in, which is our file here, and our media out. So we could add masks, we could add text, we could add colors, really anything that you can do inside of Fusion, you can do to just about any clip. So we'll scroll our clips menu over until we find our Fusion composition that we're working in, and then we'll click on this again to close it. You can see that when we opened Media Pool, it took over the spot where Effects Library is, so if you need to be moving around between these, just go ahead, click on those buttons, that's how you do it. Final button up here is nodes, and this is going to help if you want to preview what you're looking at a little bit bigger, or if you just need more space for something else and you know that your nodes are fine, you can click on this and it will hide your nodes. Or you can bring it back up and show your nodes again. So if your nodes ever disappear on you, this might be a good place to check. Next up, we have viewing windows 1 and 2, and we've already talked about these a bit, but there is a little bit more that we can know about them. If we scroll, we can go up and down, regular scroll wheel style. But if we hold Control while we scroll, we can zoom out and zoom in on certain parts of our image. So if you zoom in by scrolling up, it's going to scroll wherever your cursor is. So if you need to check out like the middle of this O, you just put your cursor in there and then scroll up. And if you want to zoom out from right there, you hold Control and scroll out, just like that. And if you get something crazy going on in here and you don't know what's going on and you want to get it back to where it was, go ahead and click right here and we'll choose Fit. And then it will fit it right back into that window, no problem. If you need to move side to side, say you're zoomed in but you want to check something a little bit to the right or left, or you just want to move it around, go ahead and hold down your mouse wheel and just drag it. And again, if you want to recenter that, just click on Fit and it will pop it right back into the middle for you. All of these split views and things like that, I would stay away from if you're just getting started because they're very useful for comparing things, but it's really easy to get yourself confused if you're working with split views and picture-in-picture and you're trying to do different VFX things at the exact same time in the exact same window. Once you're ready for that, you'll know, and you just pop over there once you're needing split view. And just like with anything else, if you want to know what something is, just go ahead and hover over it and it will tell you what it is. So we have sub view, we've got split wipe, we have all of these over here, and again, you just hover over and it will tell you what it is. If you want just one viewer open, just go ahead and click on single viewer, and then if you want to split it back up, we're just going to go ahead and click on split. And now we have our left and our right back available to us with those 1 and 2 hotkeys. So next up we have the spline menu. That's going to be up here in our upper right, and it's going to do similar things to the keyframe menu, but I would stay just in spline until you figure out what's going on. So our spline menu, we click that, we get a whole new menu down here. Spline menu is going to handle keyframes. And keyframes are going to show up once we have something selected, like our rectangle mask here. We can come over to this right side and make sure inspector is open for this. And then what we're going to do is click on any of these diamonds. We'll go ahead and do center right now. On our first keyframe here, all the way at the beginning, you can see now we have this little icon. And that is because we clicked on this. It'll go away, it'll come back, right? So now that I have that keyframed, I'm going to put our rectangle mask in viewer number 1, and I'm going to drag it around, and we can see where it is on viewer 2. I'm going to move it just off screen. We can zoom out a little bit, make sure it's right where we want it to be, and then we can come forward, say 5 frames or so, drag that right back onto Fusion there, and we made another keyframe, which you can see here in our spline menu. And the spline menu is very useful because if you click on one of these, you get these little tails, and then you can smooth out your keyframe animations. So that's a very simple one. We're moving something from the left, and then 5 frames later, it's right in the middle. So we'll connect this to our text, and it goes away because the mask is not showing it. It's not over top of our text. So we'll hit play. Got a little skippy there, but it just comes in from that left side and exposes the text. If we were to smooth this handle back out and make it flat, it would move at a steady rate. But since we have that boosted out, it's going to go faster at the beginning and then slow down as it comes in. So if it's coming in a little bit too fast and we want those keyframes to be further apart, so instead of 5, we'd move it out a little bit further, go ahead and click on your keyframe in here, hold shift so it stays on the same line, and then just drag it over. See that we have our little handle here. We can adjust it here as well. So this will give it kind of a fun little slowdown in the middle, and then it will speed back up. So we'll go ahead and whoop, kind of bounce on like that, and that's all thanks to this handle. And without the spline menu, you don't get access to these handles, so you'd have to add in a bunch of keyframes in order to create that sort of effect. So the spline menu is a great way to give your keyframed animations a little bit more life. So again, whoop, just like that. And you can see how that happens in the spline menu. If you want to speed that up, drag it over. If you want to slow it down, drag it out. And we just touched on this briefly, but it's pretty important, so we're going to talk about it in a little bit more depth. The inspector panel over here on the right side, you can click to close and click to open, just like with most of these menus. And this is going to show you a lot of things about the node that you currently have selected. So in our node web down here, we'll go ahead and close Spline. In our node web down here, we'll see that we have rectangle selected, it's outlined in red. And then in our inspector, we're going to see all the controls that we have access to for that specific node. So for our rectangle mask, we have the level of the mask, which takes it down, brings it up, and all of these things are keyframeable. So if we put one of these here, and then we go forward some frames, it's going to take that time between those 2 frames, and it will slowly fade out if we use that control. This is something that you're going to want to spend some time just playing with. So go ahead, make keyframes, move them around, see what they do, see what every little effect does in here. So we have border width, you can make it bigger than what's actually being masked or smaller. And then if you mess anything up in here, just right click on the label and it will reset it back to its original parameter. So these are the controls for our mask, right? We have level, filter, soft edge, all these. We can move it around with this. We have width, height, we've got corner radius, everything you could want to change about a mask right here. If we click on text, we see all the controls that we want for text, like color, font, the actual contents of the text. And then we have all these little sub-menus inside the inspector, like layout to tell us where we want our text to be. We have size to change the size. We've got transform. If we want to change the spacing between the characters, we can transform with these. And again, just like with masks, get in here, play with these, slide the sliders, change the numbers, figure out what they do so that you can confidently use them in your projects. So the last two things that we're going to talk about are this little guy down here, 16%, not this, ignore this, 16%, and then it's going to give you a megabyte number. This is the percent of your RAM that's currently being used by Fusion, right? So if that's at 100% and you're getting really skippy playback, that's why. It's maxing out your machine. Just give it a little bit of time to catch up. And then over here in the left corner, you can see what you're looking at. So if we go text 1, hover over that, it'll show up down in the left corner, rectangle, same way. It gives you the size, tells you all the things, and if you go over the output, it'll give you that same thing that pops up when you hover over something, right? We get all these things when you hover because it wants you to know what you're trying to figure out. All right, so those are the basic building blocks that we're going to be using for this sample build. And like I said, the first sample build is just going to be a mask, right? It's going to be a moving mask. We already saw a little bit of how to do that when we were talking about the spline menu. So we're going to get rid of our Fusion composition here and bring in a clip. This upside down clip of my B cam where I'm checking the white balance. And in order to go from this clip to another clip, we need to put this on top of our second clip. So we're going to transition from there into our node PNG here. We're going to go to this clip in Fusion. We're going to add a mask by clicking on our rectangle button here. And then we're going to drag that mask onto our media in. And we're going to use our inspector controls to make this taller until it's the same height as our frame and wider until it's the same width as our frame. So now we have the whole thing in there and we have our time represented here. So right now what we're going to do is keyframe our center because it's the size that we want it to be and we don't need to change the size with what we're doing right now. So we'll keyframe our center. And then we'll come forward to about halfway through, nothing specific, and then we'll move our y-axis up. And it's going to expose what is behind that clip. Right? So if we go back to the beginning, we can see that our keyframe is set, and as we move forward, it moves over that predetermined amount of time to the next keyframe. And if we want to give that a little bit more spice, what do? We pop open the spline menu. We pull it up in the spline menu. We grab our second point or our first point or both of our points and we play around with those handles. So right now you can see slow speeds up and slows back down, but we're going to go a little bit extra fast in the middle there, right? So we have slow, fast, and then slow again on the way out. So if we watch this back, we can see what's happening down here and up here at the same time with different information. So it's moving really slow, and then it speeds up as that line gets steeper, and then it slows back down as that line flattens out. And now we have all this alpha back here, and if we go back to our edit page, we can pull this underneath that, and then as that keyframe moves through, once we get to our PNG here, I'll move that more to the beginning. As that keyframe moves through, we will see our second clip underneath get exposed by that mask that we just made inside of Fusion. Easy as that. Now we're going to add that callout as our example number 2. And this one's going to use more than just the one mask node. We're going to use a title and a mask for this one. So we'll click on our clip that we want to edit here. We'll go to Fusion and we'll see it popped up. If it pops up the wrong one, just go into your clips menu, find the one that you want to change, and click on it, and it will open up. Get rid of our clips there. Close our spline for now. We'll open that back up in a couple minutes here. And then what we want to do is add things between media in and media out. And in order to get those in there, we're going to use a merge node. So in order to get this in between these, we're going to hold shift and drag merge right onto that line. And you'll see it split colors. That means that you're good to go. Let go of your mouse and then let go of shift, and now it's right in there in that node web. Our media in is going into our background input, the yellow one, and we need our text to go into the foreground because we want our text to be on top of this image. So we'll add text in, and then we'll drag that into our foreground input. Now we go into our inspector panel and define what we want our text to say. We'll say node, exclamation point. Change the font right in here as well. We'll change that to permanent marker, and our color. And you can do hex codes for color. You can click on any of these. You can find one in here, just whatever you want. Again, something to play around with inside of Fusion. Now we're going to grab our node right in the viewer, our text here, and we're going to move it up here where it's more visible. And it's a little bit small, so we're going to add in a little bit of a size change. Boom, just like that. Now node is way bigger, easy to do. And now, in order to get this to pop up, apparently out of nowhere, we're going to add a mask just like before, and we're going to put it right over top of our text here. And it looks like it's not quite wide enough, so we'll grab one of these edges, slide that out, make it a little bit wider, and then get that kind of centered. And I want our text to end up right here. So what I'm going to do is put that right at the bottom of that mask. Now, our mask is where we want it to be, and our text is where we want it to end up. So we're going to go to frame 0 here. We're going to make a layout adjustment because we want to move the position of our text. We're going to keyframe the center, and then we're going to move that down. And you're going to see it disappear because we're moving it out of that mask. But that hard edge looks kind of bad, so we're going to go back into our mask and adjust our soft edge parameter. And this one we're going to leave soft. It doesn't need to be keyframed or anything. We're just going to make that soft and leave it there. And now we're going to finish moving that down so that at the beginning here, frame 0, we don't see any of the text. And then we're going to move forward, say 10 frames. This is where we want it to start coming up. So we're going to make another keyframe to tell it between 0 and 10, we want you to stay below the mask. And then at 10, we have a keyframe we just made. We're going to move 5 keyframes forward by pressing the right arrow key 5 times. Now we'll see that we're at frame 15 right here. And now we're going to just move this. It will automatically create a new keyframe for you. So we're going to pop that up, and now it will stay there unless we make another keyframe to tell it to do something else, right? So we'll tell it that from 15 to 40, we want it to stay in the same spot. So we'll make another keyframe without adjusting any of the parameters. And then we're going to move forward another 5 frames, and now we're going to move it down. And since we still haven't moved that mask, it's going to cover it up as we do that. So now we have it staying in the same spot from frame 0 to 10 with those keyframes, and then from 10 to 15, popping up, and then from 15 to 40, staying in the same spot again, and then from 40 to 45, popping back down. So this is going to be pretty fast, and you're going to want to play around until you get comfy with your keyframe spacing. But if we hit play right here, we'll see it pop up, stay, and then leave. And that is going to be the basic maneuver for doing a title callout. We come out here, we have our red bar, which means it's not rendered properly yet. So we'll wait for that to turn blue. And if we watch it back, nice and easy, it's going to get to where we had that middle frame, and then it's going to pop up, stay a little bit, and leave. All in all, I know this was a longer video, but I hope that you come away from it knowing a lot more about Fusion than you did, and that you're never afraid to push that magic wand ever again. If you like these videos and you want to support the channel, the best way you can do that is to buy things from the new store, sunlitimagery.com. I've had the URL for a really long time, but I've just recently started adding things to it, so that'll be linked in the description down below if you want to support the channel and get some visual effects to use in your own videos. There's also some merch over there, so if you want to get a hat or a mug or anything like that, those will be on the website as well. Link in the description down below. That does it for today. I'll see you in the next video.